Welcome everyone to In the Hot Seat. For our repeat viewers, thank you for coming back. And for those new to the show, every 2 weeks we put industry experts and or customers in the hot seat for lively, we hope, lively discussion, some debate, and maybe even a little discourse as we try to humanize the digital experience. All aspects of the customer life cycle are up for discussion, as well as the technologies that are used throughout the each phase of the journey. And just a tip, and I think this is probably fixed, but just in case you're on LinkedIn and it starts playing a 30-second loop of us, while that might be entertaining, you can actually jump over to YouTube or Facebook Live and see it there and see all of it, not just the 30 seconds.
Oh, come on, Michael. We know that everybody wants to see us on repeat constantly.
I'm sure they do. Yeah. I'm sure they do.
So anyway. you have some really, this whole episode or the series that we're doing on AI, like I'm so excited. We're covering so many different topics throughout, and this to me is just fascinating, right? How the impact and what is happening with AI. And I mean, you did some really interesting research recently that I think is going to be, when you share it out here, and we'll get into some of those discussions with our guest. But we should definitely talk about that research.
Sure. So I did a survey early August. So one of the things I've learned about AI research is it has to be very, very current because it changes really, really rapidly, which I mean is an interesting thing, but nonetheless, I surveyed 400 people in the U.S., North America, and all the people had some association to company AI. So either they were using AI tools at work, or they were a project lead or an influencer or purchaser of AI tools for their business. So that's important to understand as you look at the data. But here, let me put the slides up. So I pulled out 3 data slides that I thought are interesting. It's the analyst in me. I always want to show data. So here we go. There, I'll put myself in the bottom. So you can see this was interesting, and I don't think this particularly a surprise at the very top, right? AI solutions in use today. Chatbots were number 1, and cybersecurity number 2, and those were close and probably not a surprise to anybody. Virtual assistants, I mean, obviously they're much more in use now than they have been. Enhanced analytics, anti-fraud, and content creation. Content creation is interesting, and I'm going to do a show on that on my other show coming up in a couple of weeks, because I think that's one of the areas that you're going to see a lot of adoption over the next year. And then I ask around what are your organization's primary reason for using AI? And this, again, probably not the biggest surprise, improve operational efficiency. But then cybersecurity, definitely a close second. Customer experience, make better decisions, and then supply chain, which is a use case we haven't really looked at, but I know we have a show coming up on that shortly. And then the one that pertains really to today's show is this question about workforce, and it's it's interesting. I think the blunt news always is that there is going to be some job disruption. I think we can be optimistic as optimistic as we want, but it is creating some change. But at the same time, it does create opportunities for people to learn new skills. It also creates new jobs. I mean, there's all sorts of buzz around talent and hiring, and I don't know, I think Google just hired some AI expert at some ridiculously high salary, which is good for that person, I guess. But anyway, so that's the data.
It's interesting because our guest today, I'm going to back up for a second, because I was at a conference, and I knew that we were doing this series on how AI is impacting jobs, and obviously thinking about things all the time about the show. And our guest came out, and he started his presentation, and the words out of his mouth just stopped me. I was like, I have to get him on our show, because he said, the way he started was like, AI is coming for your job. I'm like, back up, right? Totally stopped.
Whoa.
Right?
That's not what you're supposed to say. You're supposed to say we're all going to be fine. Come on.
Yeah, life is great. But Shawn Olds, who I'm going to bring into the studio here, he is our guest for today, and Shawn has an amazing background. Shawn is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Boodle.ai. He started his career in active duty in the 82nd Airborne Division. And Shawn, I'm probably going to really mess up a lot of your bio because it is so storied and has a lot of, you have an amazing history in the military. So I'm going to turn this over and let you introduce yourself to our audience, if that's okay with you. And then we'll launch into our discussion.
Absolutely. Jody, thank you so much for having me. Michael, pleasure to be here today. Excited to be here. You're on the right track. You had it. I was in the 82nd. I couldn't fly out of airplanes properly, so the Army actually kicked me out. And that was the late 90s, and I got to enter the dot-com boom. And so I've pretty much spent 20 years of my life building companies, both domestically and internationally. I took a brief respite after September 11th to return to government service, doing counterterrorism work, focused mostly in Southwest Asia and Africa. But after that, came back, got a graduate degree, went back overseas, living in the Middle East and Africa, working on startups. Actually taught at the University of Dubai in small business management and entrepreneurship, wrote a book entitled on the same topic, co-authored a book in that area. Also, though, during my career, I've also spent 25 years serving on nonprofit boards. And ironically, that was kind of the genesis of Boodle. Is my co-founder and I were both very frustrated as board members on how inefficient and ineffective fundraising was and wanted a way to make it easy. And so we started a company that would help nonprofits raise money and very quickly understood that this had large commercial applications and took a commercial as well.
Yeah, I should say that you gave me an alpha access to to your tools last week, and I've been using them for about a week now, and using them quite a bit actually. I'm pretty happy and impressed. I think it's interesting. I particularly like the one that connects GPT engine to the real web, so you get the combination of now versus just the historic large language model. So pretty interesting stuff, actually. So let's just jump into it. As we look at this, throughout history, we have the new technologies that have come along, and they always create a lot of fear around job displacement. I mean, when you move from agrarian to factories, and when you built steam engines, and when all those things have had effect. But how do you put this in the context of today, right? So how do you see the rise of AI in business, particularly in product development, which we want to try to focus on today, compared to past technological shifts in terms of impact to jobs?
Oh, I mean, as far as how it compares to the past, I think it's going to be as monumental, if not more, especially with the advent of generative AI. As Jody alluded, I do absolutely believe that AI is coming for almost everybody's job. But the good news is it's coming for the boring parts. It's coming for the stuff we don't really like to do anyways, and allowing us and freeing us up to be able to do the things that we find that are more challenging and enjoyable about our jobs. The reality is, and a lot of people don't realize this, is AI has pervaded our lives on a daily basis. Often when I give speeches, I'll ask people, how many of you, this was before the advent of ChatGPT, but would ask people, how many of you have used AI in the past week? And in most cases, about 10, 20% of the hands would go up. And I'd ask the other 80% of the crowd, okay, how many of you have watched Netflix in the past week? How many of you have used Google Maps? How many of you have used the Weather Channel? I mean, all of those applications have AI built into them, and people are using them on a daily basis to help their lives, to make their lives more easy. And so I think as people start to get more comfortable with AI and that it's not a steely head with red eyes coming at them, we're going to see society be able to even take on greater opportunities, and you're going to see AI abound for the better much more.
Well, it's interesting when you were bringing up the example of Netflix and some of the tools that we use every day. I feel like although AI has been in technologies for quite a long time, right? It's not a new concept. It wasn't really until ChatGPT exploded in the marketplace and everyone started going on. And now AI is almost synonymous with ChatGPT to a large number of people, and that's such a small piece, right, of what this is. So I'd like to kind of focus in on something you were talking about. It's coming for the boring parts, right? It's coming for the things that you don't really want to do. And I'm just curious, as you're building out products and you're developing technologies, and can you identify some areas for people where you think AI is going to complement this rather than actually replace human workers in the different fields?
Absolutely. So we're in the midst of raising a round, as most startup companies do. And it's been funny in talking with venture capitalists. You always want to cater to your audience. We showed them a Boodle box of what a venture capitalist can do. So, imagine a venture capitalist right now has a young associate who in the mornings, on Monday mornings, comes in and has to look up all the news on the various companies just to see if anything has happened. It could take hours on end to do. And then, you get a bunch of links out of Google, and then you got to put a story together. Now with one simple prompt of what is provide me a summary of the latest news about company X. And that prompt is set to recur every Monday morning. Now that analyst doesn't need to do very mundane tasks that are far beyond what a MBA graduate or even a college graduate needs to be doing. The venture capital firm wants it to have that person and utilize them in far superior ways that are going to be better for the venture fund as well as the portfolio companies. And there are a variety of ways. We're talking to senior level marketing people who are using this for ideation. Why sit down and spend 3 hours in front of a computer while you have writer's block when you can get some initial ideas and leverage the skills you've built upon over years to then run with it? We have our coders. I talked to a lot of coders. I had an opportunity to chat with the head of Google's AI. And he made a comment. Someone asked him in the group we were in, do you see this as a way to cut back cost on your development team? And he said, we look at it exactly the opposite way. He's like, we've measured before and after BARD, and our code production is up over 38%, because that's 38% more code we're getting for the same amount of money, because we don't see this as a way to reduce costs. We see it as a way to deliver more. And I think that's what companies are going to find.
I think, as I've looked at this and answered questions and dealt with some of my clients around it, it seems like there's really sort of two big cases for AI. One is around, taking large data sets and distilling that down into something that you could actually use to make a business decision. And then the other, and I think the one that probably scares people, is this idea of automating certain tasks. Right now we call them mundane tasks or whatever. And I think that's interesting. It does take away some of the things that you don't want to do. Obviously that's, will continue to evolve. So, with the ongoing integration of AI into business functions, what kind of new skills or roles do you think are going to come out of this, and particularly in product development? And then, if you're a professional looking at your career, how can you pivot or adapt to take advantage of some of these new opportunities?
Michael, it's interesting. I think what's going to come is still to be discovered. I actually just had a call with a potential client. Ironically, we're a client to them, but they're looking at our platform and being able to use it. And this is a firm that, let's just put it, I'll say it's kind of in the consulting space. They have many clients, and they have a team of people working there. And he conveyed to us, the CEO conveyed to us, he has a huge budget to hire a bunch of data people in to basically start from scratch. And what he's realized, he's like, with tools that are out there, what I can bring in is one individual who understands business, understand how companies work, but also understands how AI and generative AI work. And now they can work with our marketing team, they can work with our sales team, they can work with our finance team to find out what are those things they need to become more efficient. They can then put together the use case for how generative AI or AI gets used, develop the model that needs to be built, and then deliver it to those teams. So now, instead of having to go out and hire a huge data science team, they can bring in an individual who understands how these things come together, but also understands the concept of business and how businesses operate, and basically translate between the two and bring a product to bear that helps the company overall.
I was having a conversation about 2 weeks ago with some colleagues that are specializing in AI, and we were having this conversation around, you know, organizations are going to begin to hire these chief AI architects, someone who's responsible for that overarching AI methodology and how you're putting it into your product, right? But when we look at our teams and we think about the next hires that we're making for our staff, there is going to be an expectation that everyone that comes onto the team has some base level understanding of AI, correct? Is that a statement that you believe true or false, Shawn?
So it depends on how you define understanding. Understanding is in the ability to code a model and build a model. I don't think that's going to be necessary. Understanding and how AI can be used and the power of AI, so that the same way no one needs to go to not every person in the company needs to go to law school to understand the legal ramifications of what a company may get involved with. But they need to have enough business savvy and understand where the law is at, to understand when they need to reach out to that lawyer who did go to law school and be able to pull them into the conversations they're having. If you don't understand how AI can be used, what its capability set is, you're never going to be able to pull in that chief AI person or even the mid-level AI person to help make your business more efficient. So I definitely do believe we're all going to have a better understanding of how the technology works. But by no means do people suddenly need to all graduate college with computer science degrees and AI degrees moving forward.
It'll be interesting to see if universities and colleges begin putting AI in every aspect of the degrees that are being given this. I mean, AI has to be pervasive in everything that the students are being taught today. Actually, as my son is going down this path of computer science and engineering, and he actually said to me, he's like, Mom, like, at what point is AI going to actually start to code? And is my degree is what I'm going for? Like, how relevant is this going to be? Or do I need to think about my degree in a different way? And it kind of engaged in a really interesting discussion, because even at that level of where he is at and investigating this, I mean, the concern is real, even at this early, education. It's like, wow, is computer science still going to be an opportunity for me? And is it going to be an opportunity in the same way? So I guess my question out of all of that banter is, to what degree do you see AI impacting actual coding and development of the product? I mean, are we going to get to a point where it spits out code and someone's reviewing the code to make sure that it's accurate? Or put on your hat and think 2 years from now, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I'd step back and say one of the most important things we always tell people is the most powerful AI team is the human machine team. There are things that AI could do that a human would never be able to do at the speed and efficacy that an AI machine can do it. At the same time, there are things you just cannot teach an AI to do right now. And so that human machine team is always going to be powerful. And if people are worried, the industry over the past 10 years has been littered with examples of where companies relied on the machine a little bit too much. Zillow created an AI machine to go out and identify undervalued properties that it thought it could resell.
Yeah.
They have now estimated the loss on that platform at over $300 million. And that was because they didn't keep the humans involved as long as they probably should have. So do we get to a point where a lot of basic code is spit out by a machine and there's someone higher level looking at it? Maybe very much so. But we have evolved to where we're at today because of very forward-thinking coders who came up with new and unique ways to do things. And you'll always see, I think, those coders pushing the edge, pushing the envelope, and developing new ways, which they then teach the machine so the machine learns. You see this in a variety of different professions. Underwriters, I think it was Mass Mutual who made a big advertisement about how they've brought AI in. And they interviewed some of the underwriters, and the underwriters talked about how they actually didn't like the really boring part of their days doing the very mundane reviews that anybody could basically do. And what they really enjoy about their jobs is that now 2/3 of their job is now focused on those challenging things around underwriting that they're able to focus more time on, where before 2/3 was kind of reviewing just to say, hey, yeah, this got reviewed by a human and moved on.
I was I was researching and working on a blog post this morning, and I had been thinking about the Gary Kasparov chess from the '90s story. The grandmaster loses to IBM's Deep Blue, and he made a lot of noise around it at first, but then eventually he came around to it, and he came up with the idea that human machine collaboration was going to be the way that it would go forward in chess. And for a while they did tournaments, they did chess tournaments with human machine combinations, but the end of that story is that that eventually the computer model, the AI model, got better at chess than any human would ever be. And actually, they said that having the human machine collaboration was suboptimal because the human kept messing up the AI's game plans. So I'm curious how that story obviously is a very specific instance, but I guess my point with that is it seems to me that we don't really know what we don't know yet, because it is going to evolve quite a bit over the next few years. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's one of the things we actually fight with every day is people hear AI and they either picture, as I mentioned before, the steely head with red eyes coming at them, or on the other side of the spectrum, they're so bought into it, they see it as a silver bullet. And the minute it doesn't work perfectly, they're like, oh my gosh, this thing is completely wrong. And so it's getting people to understand, the first car came out, it didn't have seatbelts.
Right.
It didn't have shocks. It didn't have a lot of things that cars today have. This technology is going to evolve over time. Now, hopefully it evolves a lot faster than vehicles have evolved over time. But it is going to evolve. And in its early days, there's going to be a lot of issues. There's going to be a lot of mistakes with it. But to your point, Michael, there's also going to be a lot of learning of what it can't do and what it can't do. And things that we may need humans in the loop right now to do, we may get comfortable as we grow with the technology to understand maybe we move a little bit off the loop. We don't need humans as well, because the machine, once it's fully trained, can make better decisions than the human would make within certain speed and time. And the military deals with this all the time. There are weapon systems, mostly defensive weapon systems, where they can make a quicker decision than a human being would be able to do to protect ships, to protect bases, and to protect other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I should say I know you're an ex-Army officer. I'm actually an ex-naval officer, so I have seen some of those systems in very rudimentary form, because I also got out in the mid '90s. But it is interesting to see the combination, and I think some of the things that are augmenting to humans actually do then continue to evolve, and maybe at 5 years from now it's a different sort of things that it augments and adds, but it still doesn't eliminate the fact that somebody's checking and making sure these things are working correctly when you first go into that cycle. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to change gears just a little bit, because I did a show last week on privacy and AI, and it sort of brings up the question of ethics and ethical concerns. I mean, what responsibilities do you think companies have to ensure transition for the employees? Maybe that's reskilling, upskilling, whatever it might be. And trying to what's their ethical responsibility in trying to limit the repercussions from this shift or this change?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it's something I'm fortunate. We have a small team as we build our company, but it's something that we discuss the ethics overall. So everything from what does a company need to do to what is our responsibility as a company as we hold client data and we hold client information, all the way to the ethics of what just in general as an industry are the right and wrong things to use this technology for. So beginning where you were at, Michael, of what are companies' responsibilities, I think any company that wants to be able to hire more people in the future and be able to market themselves and their product to a community that's going to accept them, they've got to be seen to have a culture that takes care of people. And so every company has, I think, a responsibility of figuring out, hey, if we're going to use this to, instead of 10 people, I now need 8. How do I take those 2 extra people and where else do I use them in the company? Because we're using this technology to expand what the company is capable of doing, just the same way Google's looking at it from their code production. How do we make the company more productive? There's going to be more opportunities. How do we move those people into those opportunities? The bigger question that is in people's minds right now, I think largely, is what's the ethical use of what you have and how you build these products. I have a neighbor who is a very acclaimed author. And there's a lot of controversy right now in how some of these large language models were trained with copyrighted material, material that authors or artists or other people have not put out there. And there's several schools of thought on how to look at it. I actually talked to someone in the music industry last week who had almost a little bit different perspective. He's been in the industry for over 3 decades and brought up the fact that, hey, when the Beatles were laying down tracks, it was all analog. They didn't have auto tuning. They didn't have all these other features that artists use today to sell. And so is AI just the next step in technology that's going to allow the music industry to advance even further? But we have to operate within the laws we have in this country. Laws have been known to change as we have developed as a society. And so if there's appropriate changes that need to come, they'll come. But at the same time, there's industries of people, artists, and I'm not one of them. You asked me to do anything past a stick person and I'm done. So, but whether it's writers, painters, musicians, and we need to figure out how to continue to inspire those people to produce, but allow what they've produced to inspire what technology can do as well.
This goes in line. We had a question come in from one of the audience members, Thomas, very interested in the AI topic, participates a lot in our conversations. Hi, Thomas. And he's asking, where's the boundary between protectable IP and non-protectable IP when you use AI for product development? And I think that's a conversation that, depending what side of the aisle you're on, that line moves pretty quickly on a daily basis. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So having gone to law school, one of the things you learn right away is the best answer is it depends. But in all sincerity, I mean, this is the topic that's in the news right now. I mean, the courts just came out and said that materials that you produce using generative AI can't, on Midjourney and others, you can't copyright. The court system also has an ability to appeal, and there's a highest court in the land that can make a final decision. So I think a lot of this is going to play out over time. But as you look at whether something can be copyrighted, whether someone can take credit for it, it's also, well, how much generative AI did they use? If a writer simply punched into generative AI, give me ideas, but then produced everything, well, was the fact that they used generative AI at the very beginning for the ideation negate their ability to copyright what they produced? One wouldn't think so. But the landscape, I think, is going to develop over the years to come as the technology develops. And I don't think anyone right now has a clear, definitive answer on where that boundary is and how much that boundary is going to move wherever it is.
I mean, it seems like it gets really murky when you start to have the collaboration between the human and the machine, and how does that line sort of play out in the long run? Yeah, that's interesting. I want to go back to something, Jody, that you said. I was just thinking about this, and I'd done a little bit of research around higher ed and AI's impact in higher ed, and I mean, I do think it's really important, the point that it's going to have to get into the education system at all levels, right? But today, it looks to me like the greater bulk of the educators that are in this conversation seem to be going the opposite direction, that I can put my head in the sand and ignore it and it'll go away, or forbid it and it'll go away. But we sort of know that's not true. I'm just curious, Shawn, react to that. I mean, how do we get the system to catch up with what we're doing today so that we can, in fact, prepare people for what they're going to have to know in the future?
I honestly believe it's already catching up. I mean, the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. And so I think you hear a lot of the negative. That's what makes the news. I had a conversation last weekend with our babysitter who is entering her senior year of high school as a junior. So last spring, her English teacher had the class write a paper on generative AI. in where it's at. And she has already fully embraced, going into her senior year and moving into nursing school next fall, that generative AI and AI itself will be something that is used throughout her curriculum. I had the pleasure a couple of months ago to meet Ethan Mullock, who's he leads entrepreneurship at the Wharton School of Business. And he's gotten to a point where he's told his class, you can't graduate from my class unless you use generative AI. And so what he does is he shows them how it can be used, how it makes them more efficient. As an example, any good entrepreneur building a business, you go out and you get potential customer input so that you're building something that meets a real world problem, vice building something in search of a problem. And so he teaches them, first of all, you can use generative AI to take on a role of an individual and then produce questions that need to be asked to that individual. And so now walking into their initial interviews, they're better prepared and will get more out of those interviews. Mm-hmm. And so they go out and they do 10, 15, 20 human interviews. They record all of that and then feed that back into a generative AI platform, be it ChatGPT, Bard, Claude, or Boodle GPT or Boodle box, and be able to then ask the platform to replicate and create new customers like that, or potential customers. And now, instead of just knocking out 20 interviews in a month, they could knock out 100 interviews in a month and get much more impact for their work as they're moving forward and building their business plan and working on their product development.
I feel like AI, when I look at product roadmaps for the customers and clients that I work with, and we think about, all right, you go out and you scrape the websites and you're reading the product collateral. To your point, right? You ask the question, the AI tool will go out, it summarizes that data for you, and I've quickly just reduced a week's worth of time for a client down to a couple hours in a day, where now I can start reacting to what was compiled. Now, here's some interesting things as we go down the path and leveraging all of these tools, right? Not all of them are accurate. Not all of them are pulling the right information. And when you're doing that research, getting to the point where you then have to go and say, okay, where was this information found, right? Where was this cited? How do I double check this? So to me, there's another level of security and fact checking that comes into play here. Your thoughts on, as companies begin leveraging these tools a bit more, how can we feel comfortable that the information that it's producing for us has a higher level of quality and it's coming from the correct source?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. I mean, one, when we built Boodlebox, it was one of the reasons we added sourcing. So we wanted to make sure people were comfortable not only in what was given to them, but if they needed more details, they had the sources to go find that and dig in deeper. I think secondly, as models get stronger, especially as you start to see, and we've already seen this, the growth of middle layer AI agents. So companies that have proprietary data, proprietary insights, that they're sitting on top of an LLM and producing an agent that can help, and you start to bring those agents into conversation, it's going to significantly reduce the number of hallucinations. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. People are going to have to figure out a way to not just carte blanche take what they're getting back, and take what they get back as their foundation, but then research and make sure that it's accurate. There's the news quickly got made. I think the gentleman's name was Stephen Schwartz in New York, who was a lawyer who just basically cut and pasted what he got out of GPT and put it into a court document. And the other side, doing their research, quickly found out that none of the cases were there. Now, kudos to the generative AI for wanting to succeed and being very creative, making it look realistic. But again, as a human machine team, we have our part to do, and our part to do is not the cutting and pasting. Our part is the verification, and it's the old Reagan quote: "Trust but verify." Again, the technology is not perfect. It's not a silver bullet. I was joking with my wife. My daughter is 9, and I look at where when I was her age. I'll age myself a little bit, but beta was coming out. Beta was all the rave. Quickly went away to VHS, and VHS today is very archaic. I think my daughter, when she's my age, will look at ChatGPT and other platforms and look at that and go, oh, isn't that cute? Because where the technology will be 40 years from now will be much more robust.
Actually, Thomas just posted another great question that I want to pull up here on the screen, right? And he's framing it to say, is it real? Are we asking the right question? Is learning what it can do versus what it can't do the right question? And to his point, should the question rather be what it should do or not? Subtle word difference, but actually a good point.
Yep. No, Thomas, I mean, that's as I was talking with Michael earlier about, I think a lot of what is coming is still to be defined. But I do think, as you talk about the ethical discussions, and I mentioned we do a lot of work in the nonprofit space as well as the commercial, but in the nonprofit space, there's been a start of an organization called Fundraising.ai. It's its own nonprofit. Organizations like AWS, Salesforce, Boodle, and others have joined to make sure that AI is used responsibly in the philanthropic space. And that's one of the very first things a lot of us have discussed in our early conversations is, what should this be used for? What are the appropriate ways to leverage this technology as we go forward in pushing philanthropic missions? So I think it's a very good nuance and one that needs to be looked at.
When we think about using AI in product development, I mean, I could absolutely see some significant enhancements being made when we're doing roadmap planning and figuring out, the tasks, how long things should take, are taking, where we can improve those development cycles. Are there areas, and Michael, I'll wrap you into the discussion as well, right? Like, what are your thoughts? Where should AI make some improvements to help that development process, speed up, become better, more efficient, more accurate? I mean, think what it could do for the QA cycle, right, in product development. So I'd love to get your thoughts on how could we develop AI in a way that executes our product strategy better.
You want me or Michael first? Michael, please.
Sure, I'll go. I still think the simple way to think about it is start at the problem and work backwards, and then take those capabilities and apply them to the things you can use them for today, versus overextend that. I mean, like the attorney example I've used before too. I love that story because I can just see his face when the opposing attorneys went, these cases don't exist. Like, what are you thinking of? And I think, we have to know the limitations, but there are problems. There are a lot of things that it can solve today. And if we focus on that and use them in the places where the capabilities make the most sense, and they give an economic advantage to the companies that are implementing it, right? I mean, there's no point in doing it if it's not in some way helping your business be better customer experience or better marketing. I mean, I did a show on AI for marketing not long ago, and all across marketing, there are tons of tasks that it can do today that it really does well. So, I don't know. For me, I'm not sure it's the should or shouldn't do question, although I understand Thomas's point there, that there probably are things we don't want automated, and there probably are places where we just absolutely have to have a human, at least for what we know today. I mean, I love the idea of using a bot to analyze all the medical data in the world to help my doctor make a better diagnosis. I do not, however, want the AI to make the diagnosis. I want the doctor there.
Absolutely. And going back to your question around kind of product development, in 25 years of watching companies build products, especially early stage companies, one of the biggest mistakes they tend to make is, because of pressure, because of time constraints, an individual putting too much of just their mindset into it, and not kind of thinking outside the box, not taking that minute to step back and look more holistically. I use generative AI now every day. I mean, they call it, whether you want to call it dog fooding or champagning, I use Boodle every day to just ask questions and make sure that I'm thinking about things. I'll ask it to take on a role, and then ask it, X number of things, summarize these things or provide me a list of 10 things I should be thinking about to make sure I've hit them all. And usually I'll find that I've hit them all, but there are occasions where there were some neat ideas that came out that I just hadn't thought about. And for an individual product person in a very small team to do that on their own with no generative AI, that could take hours on end that they may not have. But for them to be able to take a coffee break, punch that into generative AI, walk off and get the coffee and come back and see what is there and go, oh, hadn't thought about number 8. I need to think about that. And now it pulls them back into producing a more robust product. That's only going to help things.
I mean, I've gotten in the habit for both the shows that I do of having ChatGPT or Claude, whichever one I happen to be in the mood for that day, generate the list of questions, and then I edit, of course. But it took a 2-hour task and made it 10 minutes, and that's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
The tools that I've been playing around with Boodle as well, Shawn. Great tool, love it, right? It's now going into my arsenal of what tools can I test and comparing them all across the board. But the point about, getting you to think differently, it's the one thing that I am a little bit concerned about is as people are using these tools and getting information back, we hear a lot of people positioning themselves as AI experts, right? And they're out there and they're promoting different ways in which you should use tools, different things that you should think about. And when you start diving in and understanding where this information is coming from, a lot of it is just regurgitated from other posts. So one thing I'm trying to be a little bit more cautious about as I'm taking in all of this information is all of the experts out there, right? So I guess my question to you is, you're in the field, you're researching all of these tools. Where do you go for information to keep current and up to date on what's happening in the industry?
So I'll start by saying I took my first AI course 30 years ago as a senior in college. I've studied AI through the years, and then obviously have built a company over the past 7 years. And I wouldn't consider myself an expert in AI. And any minute that I might feel like I do, I just need to sit down with my chief data officer, and she'll school me very quickly and make me realize that I'm not an expert I might think I am. As far as the tools, it's data collection. There are Medium. There's a lot of those experts that you talked about, Jody, but there's also some people that really are producing some great articles out there on what they're doing. I mentioned Ethan Mullock earlier, who's at Wharton, who's really taken a forefront in generative AI and really discussing it on LinkedIn and other mediums. But it's about data gathering. I haven't found one consistent source that is just your go-to for all AI. And I don't really know there ever will be. So a lot of it is for individuals finding what works best for them. And that's one of the big reasons we created Boodlebox is ChatGPT is not for everybody. Claude is not for everybody. Midjourney is not for everybody. But being able to bring all of those into one ecosystem so that people can work on whatever platform or platforms work well for them, and then still be able to share the information they find with their community seems like a lot stronger way for people to work with it. And to your point, Jody, get the information that people may be looking for.
Covered a lot today, gentlemen.
We did.
we dove in pretty deep here, and I'm looking at the time and I see we're right. I mean, there's so many more questions I have for you, Shawn. I'm going to have an offline conversation with you because I have so many more ideas.
I look forward to it.
But this has been awesome. I think that we have kind of circled around the wagon, and I'm going to go out there. Here's your clip, Michael. AI is coming for your job.
Awesome.
Right,
we
Shawn?
will cut
Shawn,
that one
we
out.
need to hear you say that. I want to hear that from Shawn's mouth because you said it publicly. So hold on, Shawn. We're going to bring you to solo view. We need a good clip from you.
Fair enough.
Shawn,
Yes.
is it taking jobs?
Yes, AI is definitely coming for most people's jobs, but only the boring parts.
I love it. Excellent. Thank you so much. You survived the hot seat, Shawn. It has been awesome talking to you today. And to all of our audience, if you have what it takes to be in the hot seat, let us know. We would love to hear from you. That is all we have time for today. I am your host, Jody Spencer.
And I'm Michael Fauscette. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, different perspectives as we put somebody different in the hot seat.